you. And Joe, let's see. Knowledge Build, are you on the call? See if my colleague Knowledge Build has. Oh, yes, great. Oh, he's another Miles Smith. Okay. You know what, Knowledge Build, I think, can you change your name? So your display name so that Joe knows which one you actually are.
You don't want me to be Miles Smith today?
And then Joe, Knowledge Build is going to be the one sharing his screen. If you can give him screen sharing capabilities, it would be great.
I watched something on PBS the other day.
Great. Yeah, I should have opened it up for anybody to be able to share. So
great. Well, good morning, everybody. I am Brooke Barron. I'm joining from my home in Harpswell. It was great to meet a few of you and see a few of you in person yesterday in Waldo County. So thanks for those of you who made it. And for those of you I don't know, I am Maine's Federal Program Officer for NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is an agency that's part of the federal U.S. Department of Commerce. NTIA is the agency that's tasked by Congress with implementing about $50 billion in broadband and digital equity funding in order to connect every single American to high-speed internet. This funding came from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was passed a little over a year ago by Congress.
In Virginia.
And can everyone make sure they are muted moving forward to cut down on that background noise? So as Maine's Federal Program Officer, I'm here in Harpswell, focused solely in Maine, and I'm serving to help MCA navigate the many requirements that go with these once-in-a-generation grant programs, and also to be a resource to communities and stakeholders like all of you to get tapped into everything that's going on in the ground so that I can share back to DC what's working, what's not. And the idea of this format of me tapping into the Let's Talk Broadband once a month is to provide a venue for me to provide updates and share resources from NTIA with all of you, and also to be a venue for feedback and questions from you all. I just started in October. I don't have all of the answers, but I do know the experts who can help find those answers. And today I called on one of those experts who we're lucky to have with us. So thank you to Knowledge Build Hudson for joining us today. Knowledge Build lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he's the digital equity advisor for the whole Northeast of the US. And I might also be thinking, I'm not sure if she was able to join yet, our regional director, Wendy Lader, who's the director for all of the Northeastern states. So Knowledge Build is going to provide an overview of the digital equity programs at NTIA and let you know some ways that Maine can get involved. And we'll also have an opportunity after Knowledge Build to hear a little bit from MCA about their work on the ground. So with that, you can take it away, Knowledge Build. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. Good to meet you. Let me try to get my technical stuff here. How are you all doing today while I'm working on this? Cool. All right, so I'm able to see, are you able to see the screen? Okay, cool. All right, so today I'm gonna, like Brooke said, I'm gonna give you a little background about the Digital Equity Act programs. And I also wanna let you know where we currently are in our programs. And I'll wrap up today's session by letting you know a little bit about our request for comments and explain some ways that you can be involved in helping us shape the next NOFA, which is the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So first, I'm going to start with some background about the Digital Equity Act programs. As you may know, the Digital Equity Act is, for context, the bipartisan infrastructure law allocated $65 billion to fund high-speed internet programs across the country. The bulk of the money, $48 billion, is being administered through NTIA, with $42 billion going to the 14.2 going to the FCC to do their ACP program. And then there's the bulk of it, as far as 42 is going to NTIA to do a middle mile grant program, as well as our BEAD program, and then specifically the 2.75 for the Digital Equity Act program, which is what we will focus on today. So this funding pool has been broken down into 3 programs: the State Planning Grant Program, the State Capacity Grant Program, as well as the Competitive Grant Program. So the application for the planning grant has already passed. People have submitted. States have been awarded their grants. And so we're right now in the planning phase. In this phase, states are required to develop their digital equity plans. And at the end of the 12-month period, states will submit their plans to gain access to the 1.44 billion capacity grants, and eventually the $1.25 billion competitive grant. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a moment. So states will allocate these monies. So we'll give the money to the states, like I mentioned, and the states will allocate these funds to sub-grantees in which they'll be used to address the needs of the covered populations, which are defined in the statute, which is the bipartisan infrastructure law statute. And these things are listed here. So, wait, I'm sorry, maybe I skipped over. Oh, no, yeah. So basically, everyone's gonna have to have like a vision, an objective, barriers to digital equity, outreach to engage the plan, integration, implementation. So these are the things that they're gonna need to be a part of their plan, right? And the goal is that they're gonna be using these funds in order to like meet the needs of the covered populations, right? And so I want you to keep in mind that there's intersectionality between the covered populations. So it's not to surprise you. So like, you know, people who are impacted by the digital divide, they may fall under more than one of these covered populations. On this slide in particular, you'll have our BEAD program, underrepresented communities, as well as the covered population. So I wanted to put them side by side to allow you to see our focus of our grant programs. All right, actually, I think these slides were out of order. That's why I was bumbling up here. So this is, I was like, wait, why am I already at the vision stuff? All right, and so I'll go back to it just to make sense of it, right? And so because the people should come first, and that's why I wanted to do that. Like, and that's why I was lost. I was like stumbling, like, wait, hold up. So the people's first. So those are people that I'll mention. These folks here, I'll go back to. So again, you can see low-income folks, aging population, incarcerated individuals, who also include formerly incarcerated people, veterans, persons of color. And you also see, we say indigenous, the rural inhabitants, racial ethnic minorities, people with language barriers, members of ethnic groups, right? And so we want to make sure that all these people are being engaged, right? And so then now we'll go to this, the components of the state digital equity plans, which are, they must have a vision, the objective, the barriers. So you want to identify the barriers and how to meet those barriers, outreach to engagement. So you'll want to have like the list of key stakeholders that you'll need to collaborate with the digital equity plans. You'll need to do asset inventory. And I say you, because willfully you're part of this plan, because we want to make sure that we're hearing the voices of the people with the lived experience. So it's not just, even though the state's responsibility is to write it, we really strongly encourage the masses of people to participate. As well as, oh wait, I'm on the wrong side again. Sorry guys, I feel like I'm over here dancing around. Sorry. So yeah, so integration, implementation, etc. All right, and so here we have the Digital Equity Act focuses on addressing the needs of the cover. Oh, this one's supposed to be deleted. This is going to be a funny when we watch this back. When I'm like, look at knowledge built. Okay, so here are the stakeholders. Every stakeholder plays a role, right? So we have the telecom communicator, telecom providers, community anchor institutions, tribal government. So if you have like federally recognized tribes in your state, local government, community organizations, and most importantly, you guys, right? And so now I wanted to pivot a bit to speak about the way that you can help us in this next phase of our process. So like I was saying earlier, we're currently in our planning stages, but soon, maybe early next year, we'll be pivoting to our competitive and capacity grant programs. But before we do that, we have to do what's called a notice of funding opportunity. And that's where we issue the guidelines on how people can apply. But before we do that, we have to do requests for comments. And that's what we're doing for the next 2 months. And so today I want to briefly tell you how you can submit requests for comments, because by hearing from the community, the people with lived experience, the people answering questions, that will help guide how Congress understands the best way to write the no vote. So I want to share with you a few tips for submitting comments. I hope I didn't lose you guys with my back and forth. Are you guys still with me?
Yes.
We're with it.
All right, cool beans, cool beans. Thank you so much. All right, I was a little nervous this morning. I was like, oh, and then here this happened. All right, so here we are. So the tips for submitting the comments. So today we're going to do a basic overview, background, request for comments, how to write effective comments, and the listening. And I might list a little question to allow you to see how the questions are asked. So a brief overview, like I was speaking before, the Biden-Harris administration is committed to ensure that all Americans have access to high-speed, affordable internet services and reliable. That's another important part. So a part of this goal, NTIA has published this request for comments. It happened maybe last week, and it's on regulations.gov. I will put the link in the chat to inform how the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Digital Equity Act programs can work to achieve the national and community-driven opportunity for change. I usually don't read slides, but it's important that I want to do that, right? So this is a part of our larger strategy to engage with stakeholders, partners, and most importantly, folks like you. All right, and so we went through this slide before, but again, just to highlight that we're looking at the state capacity and competitive grant programs. So request for comments, here we are here. So it gets a little technical. So basically our request is open now, right? And as of March 2nd, that started our 60-day comment window, which officially ends on May the 1st. So what you'll do is you'll notice, the notice and RFC will be available here. Now, I can share these slides with you, but like I said, it's on regulations.gov. Comments can be submitted at regulations.gov, like I mentioned, but you want to enter the docket, NTIA 2023-0002. The deadline's on May the 1st at 5 p.m. All right, so exactly how does one submit a comment? So there's several ways to do so, like I mentioned. You can also do it directly through digital equity at ntia.com. You just be sure that you enter that docket number I mentioned, and they can also be mailed into our mailbox in Washington, D.C. So here's a highlight of what regulations.gov portal will look like and some FAQs on the website. So you can see that there. And here's the regulations.gov website. Now we'll touch briefly on how to write the comments, right? And I want to mention that my colleague, Brett Litzler, he's the person who put together these slides, and he does this all over the country. So I'm a little nervous doing his role, but I think I'm doing okay. Hopefully he looks back at this, he says, great job, Knowledge Bill. All right, so the tips on crafting, here's some tips on how to craft the comments. Okay, so, wait, I'm sorry, my slide, my notes are messed up. Okay, so, I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so the strongest point of encouragement is that NTI will provide when it comes to writing comments is that you don't need to be an expert, you don't need to be a professional. All you need to do is weigh on how you perceive the answer to the question. So we encourage you to support your comment with substantial data, facts, opinions. We also encourage that you include lived experience, folks. So if you have lived experience in one, like if you understand one question better than the other, you can skip a question. Additionally, we ask that you include labels for the questions that you're responding to, and that you can answer every question, but you don't have to answer every question. It's fine. You can even write in your own question and answer if the question that you see there that is not written the way that you think it should be written. You can rewrite it how you see it, and you can answer it. In addition, to ask for folks with lived experience to be a part of your comment, we encourage you to include pros and cons and alternatives to any aspects of our programs that we're asking about. As I've said before, this will influence the way the capacity and competitive grant programs go. So any alternatives or justification that you can provide for any of those, it will go a long way. Lastly, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via our inbox. Okay, so I don't have an example. Okay, I apologize, guys. I don't have the slide I thought I had it here. That's all I do have. I thought I had an example of the questions, but I will say this. The questions are specifically asking about, like, for example, how do you define success in our programs? How should we measure success? What metrics should we utilize to determine the next funding rounds of NTIA's funds, right? So for example, currently people are in the plans. we're gonna measure that, we're gonna look at those plans, but what determines a successful plan? Should they include people from the covered populations in those plans, right? So what I'm gonna do in the chat is I will give you the link to where the RFC questions and answers, where the questions are, as well as I will give you a link to regulations.gov. I do apologize for my my little dance here, but I will take questions if anyone has any questions currently.
Knowledge Build, could you, to sort of zoom out to the 40,000 foot level, could you give some examples of how, and Maggie, I know that you'll be speaking to, but give some examples for the ways that these funds might be spent on the ground, just to zoom right into that.
So as far as the competitive grant monies,
Really any of them, just so folks get a sense of like what the idea of these grants are.
okay, so I'll go back a little bit here. That's okay. So the planning grant funds are specifically given to states so that they can design the plan. The capacity grant funds are given to the states as well to implement the plans. And then those funds could be sub-granted to people who will help on the implementation side, right? So for example, if there's an organization in your community that does digital equity work, they can be a recipient of expanding their program under competitive grant funds as well as under capacity grant funds, because they will help implement the plan. So the planning, from my perspective, the planning part is very important because it helps you identify where the needs are in your state. Once you identify where the needs are, the question is how do you fulfill those needs? So then that's when the money goes to say, okay, we recognize that in a certain part of the state, there's not high-speed affordable internet services, and 20% of the people over here do not have devices and they do not have digital skills to be an active part of society, digital citizen. So then we say, okay, how do we ensure that they are able to become active digital citizens in our society? So then you say, okay, they need X amount of devices, you need X amount of digital people with digital skills, and then those funds go to that organization to do that. I don't know if that's clear. And that may not be 20,000 feet. I might have went a little down closer to the ground.
No, that was great. I think it's just helpful to hear those examples of how the money could actually be spent. Thank you.
And additionally, I know like I said, I use the terminology dance through the request for comment concepts, right? The reason why the request for comment period is important is because the way that you all tell us how to spend the money is how it will happen. The way that you tell us how to measure how to rate and judge the plans is how we will do it. So this is a bottom-up approach, which is why we want to hear from the people on the ground, the people with lived experience, the people who are in the community. So it's not just like us working for the federal government saying, this is the way this goes and it goes like this. Every state's plans should be different. Every state's strategy should be different because the people in the state may identify the way that they should utilize the funds differently, if that makes any sense. Does anyone have any other questions? I can only see a few of you guys. I can see the original Miles Smith, Charles, and Tanya, and Brooke. Michael.
Knowledge Build, it's Maggie. Good morning.
Maggie, hey.
Thank you for being with us. And I just want to make a clarification because I think you've already said this, but folks can submit comments for both of the implementation funding sources, right? Like have an opinion about how the state should distribute their funding, how you all should structure the opportunity for states, but also let's get some comments around the competitive grant program as well, right? Like how should NTIA be thinking about and prioritizing how those competitive funds go out to community organizations and folks who are doing digital equity work. So I'm assuming the comments can be about both opportunities.
Yes, so the comments are, and I apologize again, I put up the wrong slideshow. The comments are massive in the sense of like it's a long document, but we could only ask a certain amount of questions. So some of the questions have 5 or 6 questions within a question. So yes, Maggie, you are 100% correct. So, and we did that so that we can ensure that we are getting the most from you all, right? So it's, yeah, indeed, it's like, how are we measuring our plan? How should we spend the funds? What's the best metrics we should utilize? Should we include youth? Should people get a higher weight because they have people from the covered population at the table? I mean, so it's very intricate, and it's written by the lawyers. So, we're working on trying to find a plain language version of this. And NTIA, we're going to be hosting listening sessions in which we will be getting groups of folks together, allowing them to come to us, and then hearing how they respond to this request for comments, taking notes of this. Additionally, all the comments that are coming back, we will sift through all these comments and respond to them, right? So you are basically giving us the teeth to move to the next level. Like, I might have my opinion as a person who's working digital equity. I think it should go like this, this, and this, but that's not good enough. I need you all to tell us what you think, and being very critical and going into details, because without that, it's difficult for us to say, this is the reason why we're doing it this way.
Hi, Knowledge Bill. This is Joe.
Hey, Joe.
How are you? So I wanted to, I guess, ask a little bit more about what a effective comment looks like in terms of, I think you use the word substantive kind of evidence or stuff like that in the comments. Is that speaking to like speed test data? Is that speaking to affordability stuff? Like what are the types of things in terms of I don't know, numbers or pieces of evidence that NTIA will be looking at? And if we're thinking about what the most effective comment could be, what are the types of things that people should be including specifically along those lines?
So I think you can utilize those examples as well if you were looking at, okay, speed or like speed tests. But you could also say that from your experience, you identify that when you do things this way, you get this outcome. Or when you look at the social determinants of health, you recognize that telehealth services increase the amount of or decrease the amount of diabetes or blankety blank, right? So I mean, I think it's very open and broad for you to utilize, but the key is that based off your lived experience, you add what you understand to be substantive. So it could be from a wide array of examples, if that makes sense.
Totally. Thank you.
No
I would
problem.
add to that, it'd be great for folks to cite some of the things that they've seen be successful in reducing the barriers, particularly for the covered populations that are listed in the legislation, so that we can enable those things with this funding. So in your lived experience in your community, if you're seeing things that are working, I think it would be great for NTIA to hear about those things and ensure that the way the funding is structured will allow us to do more of those things.
And the one thing I would add in building on what Maggie said is to really just speak to what you know. We don't expect any one person to have the view of the whole state or the whole country, but talk about what's working in your community, at your kid's school, at your doctor's office. That really drill down individual experience, community experience, that is going to be really valuable. And we're having these conversations all over the country. So altogether they will inform the plan. But if you don't know how connectivity affects standardized test scores in Maine, that's fine. Just talk about how it impacted your kids' teleeducation experience. So speak to your own experiences.
And then also I want to say, like, if you are interested in hosting a listening session, please feel free to reach out to us at our digital equity at NTIA website. And if you want one of us to participate in that listening session, so you can hear it from your community, we're willing to help you do that as well. I know that I'm in Pittsburgh. I think they're going to be trying to do one here, and other folks, because the collective mind is stronger sometimes than the individual. And when we get together, sometimes we get things cooking. So it's also want to build on that opportunity as well. I really appreciate you guys being so graceful with me this morning, and thank you for the opportunity for me to present. I look forward to working with you in the future. And if you have any more questions, of course, but I don't want to eat up all your time.
No, thank you, Knowledge Build. And before we get to any other questions, Maggie, is there anything that you wanted to share about the work that MCA is doing on digital equity on the ground?
Sure, I can, I have an appointment in 15 minutes, but I do have a few slides just to give folks a picture of how we're doing the planning and engagement around the digital equity plan for Maine, to give you some sense of how to plug into that process if you haven't yet, and just kind of what our overall strategy is for developing this plan. I'm going to go ahead and just share my, I'm going to maybe share my screen. Am I enabled, Joe? Can I?
Yeah, you should be. Should be.
Oh, got it. Hold on.
Okay, cool.
So in terms of where we are, Knowledge Build mentioned we have a year to develop our digital equity plan, but one of the things that we have done, sort of decision that we made for the state, was to combine our planning process for the BEAD and digital equity programs, so that we are not exhausting all of our stakeholders and community members and asking them similar questions in two different processes, but also so that we could embed our digital equity work into our infrastructure plan. And it will be a standalone digital equity plan for the first time for Maine, but we just really wanted these two planning processes to be tied together really closely to have maximum impact. So we're calling it our Broadband Action Plan, and we are in this very first column here, the engagement period. So the timing is really good to have this conversation if you haven't yet engaged. We are doing a number of things this month. There's a planning page on the MCA website. If somebody is here and wants to grab that and post it, that would be great in the chat. We are doing community meetings in partnership with our regional and tribal partners, with support from Joe and Miles and the Broadband Coalition. The survey is out online. You can also get it in hard copy. Folks are putting it in local libraries. And we will have language translations next week. And we're also doing a series of focus groups, as well as a ton of just stakeholder meetings, and really looking for opportunities to talk about the Broadband Action Plan and get feedback into the Broadband Action Plan through existing meetings. So if anyone here, has an existing event where this could be part of the conversation, do not hesitate to reach out to us, because we're really looking for ways to be efficient in this process and not create a whole bunch of new work for folks. So we will be in this engagement period until the end of April. Then we plan to take everything we've learned and all the research we've done to draft the plan in May, and we'll release it for public comment for 30 days in the month of June. And then during the month of July, we will respond to and integrate all those comments into the plan and submit it to the NTIA by August 1st. So it's a tight timeline, but there are a number of opportunities to engage in this process throughout. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this slide. This is the way that we're kind of thinking about all of the stakeholder groups and organizations that are helping us develop the Broadband Action Plan. So we've got our regional and tribal broadband partners covering every part of the state and supporting the tribal communities. We are working with our state agency partners through an interagency broadband working group. Got a workforce advisory committee that's really helping us think through the strategies to build the broadband workforce in order to deploy all this infrastructure. We are working with a capital markets task force to think through what other funding sources and creative financing options we need to bring to the table, because we know that this funding is not likely to solve all of the problems in Maine around connectivity. We are working with a statewide digital equity task force, and these are the partners who, there's about 40 or so partners in that group who are helping us to shepherd and shape the digital equity plan And these are the organizations that support and represent and work directly with the covered populations that Knowledge Build talked about. And then we're also doing a formal tribal consultation process, working directly with the tribal leaders to understand how tribal priorities can be embedded in our broadband action plan, and that we can work together. There'll be a steering committee with a couple of members from each of these stakeholder groups that will work with our board and staff to give kind of final approval of the plan when we get into late July. So these are the covered populations. You've already heard the structure of our digital equity plan will be looking specifically at these populations, which we are calling important audiences. And in relation to that, the elements of digital inclusion. So I think some of the elements here, we talk about a lot. Do we have affordable and available access to broadband? Do we have devices that meet our needs and the technical support that we need to really use them? Do we have the digital skills we need? And the last two on the list, I think, are good to point out because we don't always think about those. So one is really how inclusive and accessible are particularly the state services that are offered online or not offered online. And what can we do to make those resources and programs more accessible? And then lastly, we're using this large term internet security, but we're really trying to think about cybersecurity, online privacy, all of the sort of scams that we know can take advantage of internet access to wreak havoc. So we're really thinking about all of those elements, and particularly in relation to the important audiences that we talked about. This is sort of these are kind of all the inputs that are coming into our digital equity plan for the state of Maine. I mentioned the survey. The survey is sort of the most broad-based tool. We want everybody to take the survey. We can also do the survey as an individual interview. So particularly if you have someone who maybe doesn't have online access, but you do, and you can ask them those questions and submit their answers. We have a lot of partners who are using the survey in that way. If you do hard copy surveys or distribute them in your community, you can collect them, mail them back to us. You can get them to your regional partner in your region. And again, the regional partners are on our MCA website, so you can see who they are. And many of them are here today. The focus groups that we're doing, we currently have, I think, 10 groups scheduled, and we are working to get a few others. The goal of the focus groups is to have small group conversations with the primary audiences. So we're really looking to engage with folks who are those lived experts that Knowledge Build was talking about. And we're working through our organizational partners to get those focus groups together. And we're also trying to do them with some significant geographic range. So we're talking to the important audiences in a range of different locations throughout the state. I mentioned the community meetings. Both the Broadband Coalition and MCA have the schedule, the ever-changing schedule of the community meetings that are taking place in each region. These are really for the general public, for anybody who wants an in-person opportunity to come and provide some input into the plan and to tell us about their experience and the barriers that they face in getting connected. We had the first one, as Brooke mentioned, last night. There is, I think the next one is in Caribou next week. But those dates are getting firmed up, and we're creating opportunities in all the regions of the state. I mentioned the regional and tribal broadband partners. These folks are working on regional digital inclusion plans that will be coming back to MCA by the end of April. So the way we're thinking about this is that we are both focusing on people and focusing on place. So trying to understand what the experience of our covered populations are by really engaging with them directly through the interviews, through the focus groups, through the survey, and through those community organizations we're working with. But we also want to understand what's different from place to place in the state. So we see those regional plans as really important to understanding what might be unique what unique assets or barriers we have in each place and how can we address them with our plan and with our funding. We have taken a first draft of the digital equity asset inventory. So this is looking at what assets do we already have out there that are going to support digital inclusion, and how can we maximize those assets and help grow them and ensure that they're impactful. We have a first draft. Each of the regional coalitions and regional partners is working to add additional resources to that asset inventory. And we are developing a place on our MCA website where you'll be able to see those assets both as a map, so you can see what's happening where, but also search that as a database. So you could say, I'm looking for a digital skills program that supports veterans, and you could put that into the search category and you'll be able to pull up any of those resources that might be available there. So we need everybody to participate in that process of identifying the digital equity assets. And each of the regional partners has a spreadsheet where they're collecting those assets. So that's a significant, important part of this plan. We're also getting recommendations from specific stakeholder groups. So for example, the telehealth and telemonitoring advisory group, which is charged with looking at barriers that prevent us from taking full advantage of telehealth services in Maine. We have asked them to give us some sense of what we could do in our digital equity plan or our broadband action plan that will help enable more health programming. Again, I mentioned the tribal consultations. Those are taking place now and into April. We're also doing some research with our research partner to really look at what's the publicly available information we have now that gives us a sense of what the state of digital equity is in Maine, and then how can all of the information engagement that we're doing be added to those publicly available data sources, so we can really get a sense of where we need to prioritize, where our biggest gaps are, and where our biggest opportunities are. And then lastly, we're holding a digital equity summit on May 3rd in the Bangor, Orono region. And this is kind of what I see as probably the most fun part of this process. We're going to bring all of our regional and tribal partners together, their coalition partners from each of the regions, all of our digital equity task force partners, and put all the best ideas on the table. So really start to prioritize what are the most important digital equity strategies for Maine. What opportunities can we take advantage of? And what have we learned together that's going to help us do this prioritization process? So really excited about the summit, and I think it's going to be a significant, important moment for MCA to really hear from all of these partners about how this plan should be structured and what those important priorities are. This is another just little snapshot. So you've heard me talk about a lot of parts of this engagement process and planning process, and just wanted to give you a sense of who's doing what, because this is not a digital equity plan that MCA is cooking up. We have, as I mentioned, our digital equity task force. They're really working to get the survey to those important audiences that they work with or represent. They're helping us organize the focus groups and hosting them. And they're helping us really shepherd the development of the state plan. So when we get to the end of this, when we look at the digital equity plan, we want all of those task force members to say, yes, it does address the needs that we see in these important audiences, and it's going to be effective in reaching them. Our regional and tribal broadband partners are working to get the survey out in their regions. They're working with Miles and Joe to do community meetings. They're building regional coalitions that are organizations thinking about those important audiences and what the challenges are in our communities. And they are developing regional plans. So if you are anywhere in the state and haven't connected with your regional or tribal partner, I encourage you to do that. The National Digital Equity Center is such an important partner in all of this work. Susan Corbett, who many of you know, is the co-chair of our Digital Equity Task Force, and Susan is helping to facilitate that regional and tribal planning process with each of those partners. So really bringing her expertise in digital equity planning to that process. Of course, the Maine Broadband Coalition is doing a number of things in support of the development of our plan. As I mentioned, supporting the community meetings, helping to distribute the survey, really generally helping us with that kind of storytelling and communications around how important this plan is and what we might leverage it to do here in our state. HRNA advisors, if you run into them, that's our research partner. MCA has engaged them to help us do research and analysis of digital equity, and they are the ones who helped create our survey and focus group scripts. Consensus Building Institute is working with Jessica Perez in our office and myself to facilitate our focus groups and also to help our board and our stakeholders figure out a decision-making process, like how that final plan gets the stamp of approval at the end of this development. And then Education Superhighway has been a really important partner for us, helping to launch our affordable connectivity awareness campaign, and help us track the data for enrollment in that program in Maine. And then they're also doing some focused work with us around the opportunities for getting better connected in our affordable housing communities and outreach to some of those property owners and resident services coordinators. So we can really ensure that that it becomes part of our broadband action plan. All right, so I'm going to stop there. That's a lot of information, and I'm happy to answer questions. And I'll also put my email into the chat for anybody who has not been engaged in this planning process and wants to be. We can find lots of ways for you to do that.
Thanks, Maggie. Michael Pancook put a question in the chat. Who's participating in telehealth advisory group? Do not need specific organizations, just a sense of what types of organizations. Yeah,
the telehealth advisory group is actually a group that was formally created by the legislature. So their membership is described in the statute, and it's various stakeholders engaged in the telehealth process, like a community health organization, a hospital, I believe there's an individual, and they are all appointed to that group. Danielle Lauder, who serves on our board, is a member of the telehealth advisory group. And I could certainly connect her with anybody who wants to better understand how that group works and who the membership is.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, so thank you, Knowledge Build. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Maggie. Appreciate you all for coming in and helping us, better decipher what's going on with digital equity in the state. I also wanted to plug really quickly that we recently had a broadband caucus meeting where digital equity was also the subject matter there. I'm dropping a YouTube link in the chat if you want to see more about what that all entails.
On a meeting.
I'll also request, Knowledge Build, that you send me the slides that you presented a little earlier so that I can put those together with the recording from this session, and then ideally synthesize some digital equity stuff for the Maine Broadband Coalition as well that puts together all the information that was presented here today. So thank you, everybody. Assuming that was what everyone wanted to say. I don't want to cut anyone off. They've got other stuff. No. Okay. Well,